It's great to welcome you back to Get Connected. I'm your host, Conn Jackson. Well, it's now time in our show to talk about your health, in particular about Huntington's disease, also known as HD. It affects over 30,000 Americans, and like myself, many of us have never heard of this disease. Well, joining us to tell us more about it is Louise and Karen. Ladies, welcome to the show.
It's great to be with you, Conn.
Perfect unison. I love it.
That was our first try, believe it or
Well,
not.
I'm glad you got it on the first try. It sounded great. Now, Karen, I'd like to start with you. I know your husband was diagnosed with HD. Tell us about that.
Well, when we first were married, Matt had uncontrollable movements with his hands. They began twitching and he couldn't control them. So we went to a physician who then guided us to a specialist, and we were able to have Matt tested for HDSA. We found that he does carry the gene for HDSA and is now showing the symptoms for it.
You know, Louise, I know that Matt was diagnosed with Huntington's disease. What actually is the disease?
Well, Huntington's disease, so we call it HD, is an inherited neurological brain disorder, which slowly, over time, steals a person's ability to think, talk, walk, and reason, because the symptoms of it, which are progressive, generally fall into three different categories: movement, behavior, and cognition. Now, the disease is inherited, so if one of your parents has the disease, you have a 50-50 chance of inheriting the gene. And in Karen's case, her husband Matt's mother had the gene, and so that's how Matt got the disease.
Louise, once you're diagnosed, what are the treatment options available to someone with HD?
Well, right now there's not a lot of treatment options for someone with Huntington's disease. There is one treatment that is focused on helping to control the chorea, which are the large sweeping movements of the disease, and otherwise the disease is managed symptomatically. So if you have depression, there are treatments for depression, but there's really nothing to slow the disease, and there is no cure for Huntington's disease at this point in time.
What do you recommend to our viewers, as far as, I know you mentioned the family genes, but what else might we do to better prepare ourselves?
Well, certainly, if Huntington's disease is in your family, to work with a clinician, work with a neurologist who understands the disease. Because of the comprehensive nature of the disease, how it impacts the total person, it is important to work with a specialist. And at the Huntington's Disease Society of America, we have 39 chapters around the country that are dedicated to making sure that families have access to great care, to support through support groups, and we fund many different educational events, community events to raise awareness of the disease, and also research to hopefully find a cure.
Karen, how has HDSA helped you and your family?
HDSA has been very supportive in answering our questions to help inform us on what Huntington's disease is, and to learn more about how we can work with our physician to manage the symptoms that Matt has occurring as he diminishes.
And how long has he had HD?
We saw the symptoms about 10 years ago, and so we've seen the decline over the last 10 years.
How many people, Louise, are actually diagnosed every year with HD?
Well, actually, about 30,000 Americans have Huntington's disease, and it ends up being about 1 out of every 10,000. We haven't seen those numbers change necessarily, but the incidence, again, is family-related. So in many cases where there are large families, we'll see many siblings affected by the disease. And our efforts are really to support those families and fund the research so that hopefully one day soon we'll be able to modify the progression of the disease, slow it down, and maybe one day stop it.
Louise, is HD a neurological disease?
It is neurological. It is a brain disease, and so it does slowly affect the neurons in your brain.
Karen, can you give us an update on how Matt is doing?
Matt is doing very well today. We are very fortunate to be able to manage his symptoms as they progress, and thank you for asking.
Karen, we will certainly keep Matt and you in our prayers. And
Thanks.
Louise, is there
Thanks,
a
Conn.
place where we can learn more information on some of the things we've been talking about today?
We encourage folks to visit hdsa.org. It's the Huntington's Disease Society of America's website. That way you can get lots of information and you can find a support group in your community.
Ladies, thanks for your insights, continued blessings, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you,
Thank
Conn.
you.
Bye-bye.
If you want to learn more about Huntington's disease and other health-related issues that we have covered recently here on Get Connected, log on to our Get Connected website at conntv.com. Well, if you're getting ready for summer, you might want to find out where the #1 water park is in the world, and it might be right near you. We might have tickets for you as well. We'll be right back.